Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. This week we are talking about leash tension. So, those of you who have dogs who, once they feel the leash go tight, they kind of freak out. Either they freeze or they maybe kind of buck and pull back against the leash. That's what we're going to talk about training for today. This is especially common when you've adopted an adult dog who maybe has never been on leash before. And this is a new sensation for them, this weird feeling of something pulling on them. So today I'm going to show you what we've done with Pancake, who is one of those dogs who didn't seem to know how to walk on a leash or be on a leash. I'm going to show you some of the steps we've used, and I hope they'll be helpful for some of you. As always, you can comment below wherever you're watching the video, and I'll answer them as I see the questions. Okay, dog afraid of walks, introducing tension on the leash. If you have a dog who freaks out when the leash tightens, I'd love to hear about it. You can post a comment under the video. Oh, sorry about that. I need to try to move this guy. Sorry, guys, I have a display problem here. Ah, there we go. Okay, so who is this for? If you have a dog who freezes up when the leash tightens, like just refuses to move, or as soon as they feel that leash tension, they kind of stop and pull back away from you, from whoever's holding the leash, or as is in Pancake's case, you have a dog who kind of panics, jumps up, backs up, rolls on the ground, tries desperately to get away. This training is for you. So we want to teach our dogs that feeling some pulling on the leash is a cue to move into it, to come towards us or toward whoever is holding the leash. So in order to teach this, you do need some kind of behavior. You need to be able to either prompt or cue a come here behavior. And you'll see in the video today, I'm using a hand touch, and you can't always hear it, but sometimes I'm using a come here cue, like a little recall cue. So to start, you need some way to get your dog to move toward you other than pulling on the leash. You want to start with the absolute lightest, smallest amount of tension on the leash you can make. And this might take a little bit of experimentation on your part to see what that feels like. But if you have a dog who really panics when the leash gets tight, it's really important that you start with some level of tension on the leash that doesn't cause them to freak out, doesn't cause them to go into that either freeze or roll or jump into the air behavior. And then once you've got a little bit of some training done in an easy location, maybe in the house, where your dog can, tolerate some tension on the leash and will come to you when they feel a little bit of tension on the leash, you want to be able to train that in different locations. And also when your dog is in different positions, because there may be times out on walks where your dog is facing you, facing away from you, sitting down, whatever. And if the leash gets tight, you don't want that to be a big surprise to them. We want to give them some variety in this training so that it applies better to real life. Okay, so the sequence is going to go like this in your training. You will, and by the way, of course, you will first have had to train the dog to have the leash put on them comfortably, which we covered last week. So you'll start with just the very slightest tension that you think the dog can perceive on the leash. Then you'll prompt or cue your come over here behavior, so the hand touch or recall or whatever you choose to use. And then you'll positively reinforce, hopefully, the dog moving toward you after they do so. So I'm using treats. You could use other reinforcers if you like, but treats are pretty handy for this. Okay, let's switch over to the video. Okay, so I have Pancakes here because this is another video starring our dog Pancake. And And for him, we started out actually just reinforcing standing still when I did the very smallest amount of sort of tug, or not even a tug, you'll see movement of the leash that he could sense. So I did then ask him to move toward me in the next step of the training. But at first, I was just saying, hey, if you can just tolerate this and not, his behavior when he felt leash tension was to kind of jump up on his back legs and kind of buck back against the leash, and then sometimes fall over and roll. So not great. He was pretty scared. Also makes walking difficult since it's hard to avoid any tension on the leash during a walk. So at first I just said, okay, can you handle just not doing that? Just standing still. So I think I have, okay. So here's Pancake during one of his very first training sessions with the leash. And if you can kind of see how right now it's on a collar, I'll later have it on a harness. You can see how the clip is hanging down. And you'll hopefully be able to tell the very small movement I'm making with the leash. So right there, I just lifted it very slightly again, and then just fed him. And there we tried a little hand touch. So I don't know. I was trying to be so careful with the amount of tension, really not putting tension at all on the leash. It was more of a just he could feel the clip moving a little bit on his collar. So this doesn't look like a lot, but you may well have to start at a point like this if you have a dog who doesn't tolerate the leash very well. But we moved on quickly from this to do a very slight tension and then having that hand touch. So I want him to learn that when you feel that little tug on the leash, that means come over here. Okay, so here a very slight amount of tension and a hand touch. So that tension has to come before the hand touch because we want the leash tension to predict at first the cue to come over here. And you can see I'm really going for a level of pull on the leash that isn't so unpleasant that it causes him to either pull against it or lose his balance toward me. Now, since he has 3 legs, it's especially obvious when he loses his balance, and he loses his balance more easily than most dogs. I'll have some examples of some situations in which I did apply a little bit too much pressure near the end of the video, so you can see what it looks like when, you did a little too much and you need to back off. Okay, so since those very small amounts of tension on the leash, he did well with, it wasn't so much that he, responded negatively to it or felt the need to step toward me either. He just kind of kept doing what he was doing until I cued the hand touch, which is fine. Now I'm going to add a little more pull, just a little bit. You'll also see here some variation in the position that Pancake is in when I do the little pull on the leash. I think sometimes he's facing toward me, sometimes away, sometimes he's sitting, and also varying that how far away from me he is when I pull on the leash. Those are all things that are going to vary in real life when you're out on a walk. So there I pulled a little harder, and he did step back a little, so that was probably more than I should have applied. Here's a little more tension and distance. There again was a time, I'm going to rewind that so you can see that it might have been just a little too much because I'm not sure if you can tell. Let me see. So I pull. He kind of adjusted his back legs back a little bit as if he were bracing against the tug, which I want to stay under that level of tension. So that might have been a little more than I should have done there. Here's one where he's sitting, pull, then hand touch cue. More distance. Okay, once you've got your dog able to tolerate some tension on the leash and they're turning and coming to your, hand touch or your recall cue, whatever it is that you're using, pretty readily, and you're not having any negative reactions to the tension on the leash, so none of that freezing up, backing away, bucking, etc. You can start to delay that when you give the cue, so increase the time between you giving a little tension on the leash and then saying come here or touch or whatever you're using. And what you're going for here is starting to see if you can transfer the cue from you saying touch or come here to just the tension on the leash, because ultimately that's what you want the dog to respond to when you're out in a walk. So you'll see a few examples here of Pancake responding to the tension on the leash before I start to give the cue, and he's already turning. So that's what you'd like to see. I'm tossing treats to make him move away from me so I can do it. So there I was pulling, and he just came over without any extra cue. And again, I'm rewarding every time right now because this is a new behavior. Any questions so far? This is all just about making leash tension into a cue to move toward you. Okay. So obviously, in the house isn't the main place I need Pancake to walk nicely on leash. We'd like to actually go for walks. And I will next time talk about getting out the door in terms of dogs who are afraid of being outside. But today I'm just going to show you some examples of outdoor training. So after we did some house training, here's some training we did just on the front porch. And I don't know if you can tell by his body language, but this was pretty early on in his outdoor experiences, and I really should not have been doing leash training at this stage on the front porch. It was enough for him just to be out there. But I had some video of the steps, so I thought I'd share them anyway. So light, tension, and then hand touch. So when you change locations, there's a good chance you're going to have to reinstitute that extra cue, the come here or the touch, at least in the beginning, even if they don't need it anymore in the house. And that's okay. You just work with it a little bit and then go back to, either delaying the cue or just not giving the cue and waiting till your dog comes to you after you give a slight tension on the leash. And here is out in the real world, or at least Pancake's real world in terms of where he goes walking. I apologize for some of the jumpy camera work and angles here. I was out actually on a walk with at least one. Well, I had two other dogs with me, and at least one of them was also on a leash. So it wasn't always the best setup for taking video. But here you can see I have one hand where I'm going to apply just a little bit of pull to the leash. And then when he turns up toward me, I feed him right next to me. Here's another one, a little more space. And I think I cued to come here because I waited a couple seconds and he just ignored me and kept sniffing. So I called him. Here's again a little tug. And then I think I called him. So I was needing to put back in that supplemental cue, the come over here cue, initially when we were working outside. Here's one in the sitting position. Pull, and then he gets fed over by me. All right, and then do pay attention to the kind of distractions that you're asking your dog to come away from when you do tighten the leash a little bit. So if you think about the things your dog does out on walks, they sniff, they look at critters, they look at people moving by, whatever. You want to make sure you just incorporate some of those opportunistically as you're out training on a walk. So just as an example, we have here Pancake is sniffing a tree. So we did a little practice there of slight tug on the leash and then get your treat over by me. Here's sniffing the ground, little tension. Ooh, this is the big one. The big dogs are digging for something. And I gave him put a little tension on the leash and then fed him when he turned back toward me. Okay, so when do you know you've gone too far? Well, obviously, if your dog shows that problem behavior, that full-blown problem behavior you're trying to get rid of or avoid, like the freezing up or the jumping into the air or rolling, then you've definitely, pulled too hard, gone too far in the training. But I have a few not quite so obvious signs here from Pancake. So here's one. So here I have the leash on the collar. I think, watch his back feet. I think this is one where when I applied a little pressure, he moved his back feet back away from me to kind of brace himself. Or no, he did a little hot back. So that's like a really mini version of his problem behavior. And so, of course, I still fed him and just backed off right away and tried again. But that was a little teeny buck where he was saying, nope, that's too much. Here's another one. Right. So here, I'm going to play this again so you can see it. Then I'll show the next one. Okay. So I tug and he does kind of a, nope, pull away. So that was telling me that was too much at the time. Here I pulled, and instead of coming toward me right away, he shifted his weight back to sit or lie down. There's one where he shifted his back legs back. So those are really quick. I should have put some more time in there, but just one more time, 3 examples of the me putting too much pressure and how I could tell from Pancake. There he jumped back. Here he's going to pull back against the tension on the leash and sit down. Here he shifted his back legs back to brace himself. So it's better if you can spot those little signs and back off right away rather than, missing those and then only responding by making the training easier when your dog really freaks. It'll that when your dog goes into that full-blown panic, your training can really be set back. So I definitely recommend slowing that down. At the very first sign, even if you're not sure, you're like, well, did he take a step back? I'm not sure. It doesn't hurt to take a step back in your training. Just, cost you a minute or two. And it's better than the alternative, which is judging incorrectly that the dog is fine. This is our link to the group. If you're not already in the support group, go ahead and jump on in. It's just a free support group for people struggling with pups with fear, aggression, and reactivity. One other point I should mention, I think I do not have a slide for it. Sorry about that. Is, maybe I do in here. Let me check. Is equipment. Oh, I think I forgot to make one. Oh, well. You'll notice that in the video, I practiced with Pancake with the leash attached to a couple different collars and also a harness. So you will want to incorporate different equipment into your training if you plan to walk your dog on more than one thing. So if it's always the same harness and always the same attachment point on the harness, then you can probably just work on that. But if you're like, well, I want them to be able to walk on a collar sometimes as well, then you'll have to incorporate that into your training deliberately. Now, most dogs I know, learn the stuff kind of on their own, likely primarily through a negative reinforcement contingency where the dog learns that annoying pressure on the leash lessens if they step back toward their mom. And if it's not a dog who's particularly sensitive, which is really most dogs who learn how to walk on leash, you never see any real problem behavior from it. But for those of you who have these dogs like Pancake who have reached adulthood without ever being on a leash, or if they have, they've been dragged and now they have a really strong negative reaction to being leashed, you will probably need to train this really deliberately, actively. You can't just you could try to just let them figure it out via negative reinforcement, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's hard enough already to get these guys comfortable walking on leash. Okay, any questions on leash walking, dogs who are scared of the leash? Okay. All right, everybody. Next week, I'm on vacation, so there won't be a video next week. And then the following week, we'll pick up on with helping dogs. It'll be Pancake's example again. Learning to be brave and venture outside and start to enjoy walks outside the house. Until then, have a wonderful week, and I will see you online.